11 o'clock, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Until then, we'll leave the cover slide up for you guys, and then we'll get started in just a bit. So hang tight. Hey, to the folks who have joined us, just give us a few more minutes, and we're going to start. We're going to start about a minute after, about 11:01, just to let everybody online join and get settled in before we get started. So thanks for the patience. All right. Well, we're going ahead and get started here. It's 11:01. Thank you for everybody who is online with us today. And hello. We are excited to have you here. We're going to be talking about a topic that is near and dear to us here at CleverTap, and that's customer lifecycle management, also known as CLM for the acronym-centric folks that might be with us today. To start off with, I'd like to just quickly introduce myself. I'm Kevin Karnes. I head content here at CleverTap, and I'll be your host for today. I'm joined by my amazing colleague, CleverTap co-founder and CEO, Sunil Thomas. And Sunil, would you like to say hello to the folks who are online with us today?
Absolutely, Kevin. Thank you, everybody, for your time on this webinar. I'm really excited to be here. I am one of the three co-founders and the CEO of CleverTap. We've been at this business for more than 5 years now, and it's been an exciting ride so far.
All right, well, jumping right in, let's just go over real quick the agenda and what we're going to be covering today. First, we're going to be kicking things off by discussing the current state of 2019 and kind of setting the stage. So what to watch for, what to expect, why we're even talking about CLM to begin with. We'll follow that up with a brief primer on what CLM actually is and what it means for marketers today. We'll then move right into some actionable tips on how to automate and analyze CLM. Then we'll share some specific campaign ideas and examples and conclude everything with the benefits of our recommended approach. And of course, we'll leave you with a few resources that we put together that you can grab and take action today or reference in the future. You'll also, at the end, have an opportunity to ask questions. So you can type those in at any time during the webinar as we kind of move along and progress and as questions come up. So without wasting any time, let's go ahead and get started and jump right in. I'd say for Sunil, I think it's important to frame the topic of CLM by first covering, where things are today in 2019 and what teams need to be aware of, in order to create effective marketing campaigns. So where are we today, and what should marketing teams keep in the back of their minds as they make their way through this year and the years to come?
Yeah, so I think the difference the past few years has made, Casey and everybody on the call, is the advent of mobile, right? I mean, this is no secret. This is nothing that everybody doesn't know. But the fact is that mobile devices, the proliferation of them has really changed how consumer companies look at their users or have to look at their users. And CLM's an old concept, but given the fact that today every individual is out there, has multiple devices, an iPad at home, a phone obviously always on, maybe a desktop or a laptop at work, that kind of a thing. Mobility has increased, people traveling different places, all of that. Locations are much more important now. When you land in a new city, how are you treated by the brand and so on. It's not only always plugged in, but it's a very personal device. I mean, obviously, clearly, we don't like to share our phones, with our better halves or worse halves or even our kids. Everybody has their own, and everybody wants their own. And this is really very, very different now as compared to 5 years ago, even maybe. And that's what's brought to me CLM, and we'll cover that. And that's why I believe marketers and growth teams need to focus on customer lifecycle management in a much more different, agile, and a much more contextual way than we've ever done before.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And so I guess then this leads perfectly into the next section, which is understanding CLM and kind of defining what it is. And so at its core, what exactly is CLM, and also what isn't it? Because I think there's a lot of different definitions for these buzzwords buzzwords and acronyms that are out there. So let's kind of define what CLM is and get everybody on the same page for the slides that come.
Yeah, so customer lifecycle management is a simple thing. It's marketing to users based on what stage they are in. I mean, if a brand new user has installed your app or visited your website for the first time, you should treat him or her differently as opposed to a power user who's a loyal customer for many years and so on. So the basic concept of customer lifecycle management is the ability to talk to people in a language that they understand based on their lifecycle stage. And what you see on the screen are what is, I mean, we've all seen this before, right? It starts with acquisition of users. You retain them, then you figure out monetizing, how to monetize them, how to reward them, run loyalty programs, etc. And for people who go to sleep, you want to sort of reactivate them. There's a couple of subtle things that you'll see in this deck, and one is right here. I mean, I think the first step to making CLM actionable for all of you out there is to change even the stages to become verbs, right? Like verbs become actionable in the sense when you say acquisition is my first stage, just turning it into subtly what we recommend all our customers to say acquire. Now you're worrying about like acquiring whom, retaining whom, monetizing whom, rewarding whom, and reactivating whom. So just first stage is actually to just change the names of stages that you might be used to into sort of action verbs, and that will lay the first step, I mean the foundation, if you will, to make this actionable. A couple of other subtle points. Life cycle, these stages that you see are not linear. Obviously you don't retain a user and then monetize and then reward, and after which you have to reactivate. This is not sequential. Users take their own path and fall into stages as they come to like the brand, hate the brand, get used to the brand, whatever their life cycle is. And I don't have to emphasize this, but effective CLM has a direct effect on profitability and lifetime value of users. And we've seen this, like I said, if you've been in this business providing marketing automation tools for more than 5 years now, and we've just seen a massive difference in people who do it, brands who do it versus brands who don't. Last thing before we leave this slide, Casey, and to this question is that there are different models of CLM, of lifecycle stages itself. Meaning, Dave McClure has a model some of you must have heard, AARRR. There are certain like 7-step stages instead of 5-step stages, but all that doesn't matter. I mean, you should just pick the most favorite one that they're all basically the same thing. So pick the one that you like, turn them into action verbs, and then you can start actioning them, like we'll see hopefully in the rest of in the next few minutes.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the key thing for this slide too is just to touch on that it isn't linear, and the way that people and users traverse through your brand and the experiences there is more like Flight of the Bumblebee as opposed to this binary kind of A to B point system, right? It's all over the place, and everybody has a different experience. Hence, why it's so important to kind of manage different life cycle stages in its entirety. So automation, just like I think CLM, is another kind of buzzword in the marketing realm. And since it's such a hot topic in the marketing arena, Sunil, I'd like to ask, is there an effective way to automate CLM today?
Yes, there is, and there are multiple ways to do it. But we've found doing a recency frequency analysis on your users is one of the best ways to do it. And I don't know how familiar people are with RFM or recency frequency monetary value analysis of your users, but we've made this as a core foundation of what we offer at CleverTap as an automation framework. And I can explain the concept a little bit, and then we can see what happens once we understand this concept. So recency, the concept of recency is how recently have I seen you as an individual user, right? Using my apps, using my website. I mean, have I seen you an hour ago? Have I seen you a week ago, a month ago, a year ago? That kind of a thing. Frequency is a concept of how often I have seen an individual user in a given period of time. So in the last 6 months, have I seen you, 5 times, 10 times, 25 times, 0 times, 1,000 times? So the concept of recency and frequency, the analogy, the intuitiveness of why it came about as a core foundation of our product actually is the intuition around it. Meaning, if I talk to my best friend 3 times a day or 5 times a day, our conversations are very different than if I talk to a very, very good friend, but I've met him after a year. So the more recently you talk to your users or your users engage with you, the kind of conversations that you can have are very different to the users who don't engage with you as recently, as frequently. Product updates, you don't have to give it to a person who's been on your site 10 times yesterday, that kind of a thing. So that's the intuition around why recency frequency helps analyze automatically what lifecycle stage is best apt. What lifecycle stage a user is in, and helps you to sort of adapt your messaging to that stage. So Casey, if you go to the next slide, we can show what happens if you run this analysis. So this is what we do with recency and frequency. So if you look at the x-axis here, that's a recency score, where every user of your app, website, basically of your brand, is scored on a recency score of 0 to 5. 0 is the low score, 5 is the high score. The y-axis is a frequency score, and it's the same thing. 0 is a low score, and 5 is a high score. So if you broadly look at this grid, right, the top right-hand side, the blue sort of box that you can see are your champion users. So these are your most recent users and your most frequent users. They rate 5 and 5 on this grid, if you will. And if you just look at the extremes, and I'll go clockwise from champions down to the bottom right, and that's your new customers. So these are people who have no frequency score established, but have a very high recency score. So these typically become your new users, if you will, people who've just downloaded the app, just visited your websites, and so on. And as you continue going sort of clockwise, the bottom left corner are your hibernating users. I mean, recency score of close to 0, frequency score of close to 0. They're pretty much gone to sleep. But as you continue clockwise, you come to the top left corner, you come to your cannot lose them users, if you will. So these are very high frequency scores, meaning they used to visit you often, but now recency is declining. And these and so on. So a simple analysis of any sort of behavior, whether it's launching the app, visiting the website, purchasing, booking a cab, going on a date, no matter whatever your application is about, doing a simple recency frequency analysis of any specific user action lets you plot, over a period of 6 months, say a year, 30 days, whatever your period is, lets you come up with these 10 segments that are very, very nice for you to sort of start dealing with from a CLM perspective.
All right. So that makes sense. So tying it back to lifecycle stages and CLM, how does this type of analysis look like or map to those different lifecycle stages?
Yeah. So if you now try to sort of map those action verbs that you saw, early on a few slides ago into these segments that are automatically created based on recency and frequency of every user, you can start to sort of make these kind of mappings. So for example, we'll come to acquisition maybe as the last one, the acquire. But if you start at retain, you want to try the hardest to retain your new customers. So these are new customers that have just come, that are experiencing your brand or product or app for the first time. You probably acquired them by spending money with ads and whatnot. So these are the users, if you will, that you want to work on retaining the most. Run onboarding journeys for them and so on. Monetizing, now when you come to monetizing, like you want to monetize your, of course you want to get money out of all your users, but you want to focus monetization on your loyal customers, your potential loyalists, or your promising customers. And when I say monetize, it's not about it's not about like that you want everybody to buy, but the way you monetize a first time, somebody who's never purchased from you before, versus the way you monetize a potential loyalist could be very different strategies. And that's the whole magic, if you will, of CLM. You can monetize different segments of people differently. So you monetize potential loyalists by maybe bundling offers, for example, so that you can increase the value of what they put in the cart. You monetize your first time or new users by maybe giving a first time purchase discount, whatever. And that's lifecycle management. And this just shows an idea of the mapping. Obviously, as you work through it, a lot of our customers using our products today do map different segments with different stages, but this gives you an intuitive sense of what you can do. You come to rewarding users, you reward your loyal customers, your champion users. And it's very simple. Even simple things like you want to increase rating of your apps in the App Store. Why don't you only send that request or that sort of in-app notification, if you will, to your champion users, and don't worry about getting ratings from your hibernating users or users who need attention, or even your new customers till they get used to the brand. And then you come to reactivating, and there's obviously a whole bunch of segments in that grid that you should reactivate. But again, the control of this automated kind of segmentation that is based on recency and frequency, it allows you to now have slightly different reactivation strategies for your completely hibernating users as compared to your cannot lose them users, who are very frequent, if you remember, and not so recent anymore. So this just gives you a sense of mapping of what you do. Acquisition is a big thing, and both Facebook and Google, for those of you in the mobile apps world, have lookalikes within their custom audiences and so on. So what you want to do is actually take your best users that are in your app right now. So your champions, your loyal customers, your promising users, and your loyalists, potential loyalists, if you will, and then run remarketing campaigns with lookalikes on Facebook, for example, that you can then try to acquire similar users to your best users. So instead of sort of, obviously depending on your budget, etc., but instead of acquiring, just sort of spraying and praying your ad dollars, you can try to run lookalikes with your best users to acquire similar users. And that also helps with return on ad spend. So again, the segments you can see, cannot lose them, at risk, hibernating, and all of these things are exactly the segments that you saw on the grid before. These are the segments that RFM generates, and we generate automatically using RFM. The model of, the concept of RFM analysis is not new. There's a lot of material out there, including Wikipedia, etc. But what is new is the access of sort of these instantaneous RFM analysis to marketers and to growth teams. This used to be in the realm of data sciences so far. Every data scientist knows about RFM and all of that, but simply translating it to to user behavior within your apps, and being able to map your users into stages based on their recency and frequency of use of your app is what's actually very new and definitely very exciting for us.
So you alluded actually to a few of these and touched on a couple campaign examples and some specific tactics to do. But can you illustrate a few more specific campaign ideas and show the group here how this might look for different types of brands today?
Yes. And this is, again, these are just ideas to sort of, spark your creativity. I don't claim to be the most creative marketer out there or the most creative growth hacker out there, but simple things. I mean, if you have the granularity of these segments, you can do very interesting things with them. So we can take monetization to start with. I already talked about this a little bit, but for your potential loyalists, you can bundle deals, for example, so that you get a higher cart value or a cart spend. You can run recommendations based on their interests, again, to try to get that impulse purchase from a potential loyalist that you're more likely to get than from a new user or whatever. You monetize promising users, meaning these are not yet your loyalists. They are still climbing up that recency and frequency grid, if you will. And you can monetize those people by having some limited time offers. So limited time offers, meaning deals ending this weekend and things like that, tend to not go that well with your loyal customers and so on, as they in comparison with your promising users, people who are getting used to your brand and so on. On the reactivation phase, again, like you cannot lose them. Again, I mean, I don't have to read through what's on this slide, but you can. The point here is that how badly or how much important it is to the business to reactivate people who used to be very frequent and all of that should be different than sort of reactivating completely hibernating or sleeping users. So you can do a bunch of remarketing stuff, discounts, credits. I mean, again, marketing creativity in your own domain, in your own vertical, you are better off deciding. But the idea here is that you get people segments of interest that you can then go and do lifecycle management with. Casey, you want to add to this? You should, but I'm sure there'll be questions that'll come in the end also.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I want to leave a little mystery because I have some surprises at the end, a few slides, a few resources that we're going to give you guys. There's a bunch of stuff on our blog, but we actually have a couple resources for you guys to grab too that'll actually highlight a lot of these different campaign ideas so you can take with you. There's a lot of stuff here, right? I mean, you're not going to be able to consume all this stuff, memorize it, and then go act. What we do want you to do though is have some ideas like Sunil's alluding to here to get you inspired on how to kind of retrofit this into your brand and what your goals are. So you have an idea how to run some campaigns that are solid and tie all this stuff back into some framework like RFM and mapping that into customer lifecycle. So I won't give specifics because I do think that it's an infinite amount of ideas that we can come up with and talk about, but we don't need to go over all those right this second. But what I do want to talk about are the benefits. But before we do, this on the engage based on RFM segments, do you want to touch on anything on journeys or anything here?
Yeah, I do, and this comes to a little bit of specifically what CleverTap the product allows, right? I mean, this is we have this concept of user journeys, and user journeys is how you essentially, or how our customers essentially manage lifecycle. So user journeys is nothing but a sequence of operations with an entry criteria and or an exit criteria. So an entry criteria is like the people who qualify for that journey, and they sort of come into this flow, if you will. And the flow, of course, you can decide a whole sequence of operations. For example, an onboarding journey, an onboarding user journey, the entry criteria could be people who've installed or downloaded the app and run it for the first time. So people who run my app for the first time qualify for this journey. And then it's an onboarding flow. You welcome them with an in-app message. Then, you might want to wait for 2 days and then, send them a push notification, a piece of content that you want to recommend. You want to, 3 days later, send them an email, things like that. And this doesn't show an exit criteria, but you could have a goal. I mean, your goal might be that for your first time app launchers, you want them to get them to register, right? So that they register with an account, give you an email address, password, become identified, whatever. And if that's a goal, you sort of work on these people for a period of days, weeks, months to make that happen. And so the idea here in terms of automation is that you create a bunch of journeys for all of these segments. So you have a journey for champions, you have a journey for your at-risk users, you have a journey for your new users. And as people rise and fall through that recency frequency grid, if you will, as somebody becomes a champion, then your sort of reward journey that's been configured to deal with people becoming a champion will kick in. So that's the automation framework that as every individual user goes up and down the grid, he or she is treated in the way that you as growth teams, as retention marketing teams have decided that lifecycle stage needs to be treated with. So that's how it all comes together. The framework is automated in the sense that it is always calculating recency and frequency scores for every individual user, and it's automatically mapping them on the grid. Once they map onto the grid, meaning they move from one segment to another, they are triggered on, or they are started on these user journeys that have been created with entry criteria for each of these segments. And the whole thing comes into play. So as a new customer comes in, he starts with an onboarding journey, then he starts becoming, more recent, more frequent, becomes a promising user, maybe gets a little offer that's time bound, becomes a champion, maybe gets asked to sort of rate the app, or gets rewarded with some sort of a longer term loyalty program and so on. And as he or she starts going down the sort of grid, also starts getting reactivated and so on appropriately. So that in the nutshell is the whole framework that we're talking about, really.
All right. So then I think to end this, before we go into Q&A time, the one thing I want to highlight is, we've covered the what, we covered the how, we've given some ideas and some inspiration there, but what exactly are the benefits of this? And can you explain the benefits of using RFM and why teams should use this method as the basis for their CLM?
Yes, and we might have covered this, but in conversation, yes. But to sort of wrap it up, it is. I mean, I'll use the second one first. It is 100% automated. Once you set up these journeys, depending on each stage, every user is plotted and sort of goes up and goes down the stage and automatically kicked into the right journey. So it is 100% automated, and that takes a lot of sort of work and rigor out of customer lifecycle management. Obviously, you can improve the journeys itself, how you are treating or how you are experimenting with different reactivation programs and things like that. But at the end of the day, it is all automated is part of the big benefit. The first benefit, I mean, it is actionable. And I think that is what it needs to be actioned in today's world is the way I would frame this benefit. If it's so fast today because of these mobile devices, because of, like users just not having sort of attention span these days is extremely small. It is competitive, and there are like a lot of applications doing the same thing. So there are choices that every user has. And I think if brands are not sort of not working on users to sort of keep them up and down the life cycle stage, it is a problem. So I do think that, it is a problem in the sense that I think it's a disservice to the brand itself. So I think it needs to be actionable. It is 100% automatable, and this the last point is important here. It's flexible and it adapts, and that's where the whole machine learning of the RFM model itself comes in. I mean, because it's a normalized score between 0 and 5, like you saw a few slides ago. Say you're doing a wonderful job, right, with your apps, and all your user bases frequency is increasing, recency of users increasing, frequency of users increasing, and sort of the tide is rising overall. But because the scores get denormalized, it gets normalized to sort of this 0 to 5, you're still differentiating between your champions and your sort of hibernating users. Maybe the automatic qualification to become a champion was, I see them 3 times a week. But now, because you're seeing more and more people 3 times a week, the definition of champion automatically adapts to becoming now 5 times a week, because you are taking your whole user base and sort of normalizing it. And it's also important to note that, depending on what domain, what vertical you have, the recency and frequency changes. There's a natural rhythm to this, right? I mean, if you are Uber or Lyft or even some DoorDash, where you do like food delivery, right? Users might use you 2, 3, 4 times a week. For example, if you are a news app, people might use you 2, 3, 4 times a day to see, to read different news, sports headlines, whatever they do. But if you are an Expedia or if you are airline ticketing, whatever, then people will probably use you 2, 3, 4 times a year. So there is a natural rhythm of recency frequency, and that's where again the normalization works, because your champions are still going to be your champions, because it's going to look at your users and then identify the champions.
All right. Well, that kind of concludes the slides that we've had prepared for you guys. What we're going to do now is move into a few Q&A from the audience to kind of have Sunil rapid fire some of this stuff and answer some specific questions that you guys had from the slides. After this, I just want to mention we will leave you with those resources that we talked about, so you guys can see where to go, where to grab that ebook on some of the stuff that we've talked about here today. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and look at the questions here and grab the first one for you, Sunil, and it is, okay, this is a good one. How does this impact customer lifetime value and acquisition costs?
Yeah, so I think, the customer lifetime value implication is pretty obvious. I mean, if you are actively engaging users, if you are getting into dealing with users at the right stage, at the right time, with the right context, etc., lifetime value increases. I mean, in our customer base, we've seen like north of 30-35% better lifetime values, just 6 months into starting to do like good CLM, right? So that's obvious, that it, it's also intuitive, but we've also seen results where it's pretty apparent and quite dramatic at times. Sorry, the second parameter, Casey, was what? Lifetime value and
acquisition costs.
Acquisition costs, yeah. Acquisition costs, your mileage will vary, right? I mean, if you really find lookalikes of your best users, again, the intuition is that acquisition costs costs are not reduced, meaning you still pay as much as you pay for getting the download. but your customer acquisition cost to conversion might improve, meaning the number of people who install the app but go on to register with you, who go on to purchase with you, or go on to subscribe or whatever. So if you take your conversion event and you calculate your acquisition costs, like cost to conversion, if you will, that has again seen dramatic improvements with our customers. So you just get better users who stay with you longer. Uh, is the slight difference there, as opposed to reducing your acquisition costs. You'll definitely reduce your acquisition costs towards conversion, whatever that conversion event is for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, second question here for you, Sunil, is there other segmentation tactics that work well with RFM? So maybe like stuff like psychographic segmentation or any of that. How does that kind of fit into RFM, and is one complementary to the other, or should they be treated separately?
Yeah, I think so all kinds of segmentations will work, and it's really based on how sophisticated your marketing team or your sort of data expertise is, if you will. We have customers who do lifecycle management based on very simple user segments, meaning people who've not purchased with me, people who purchase between 1 and 3 times, people who purchase between 3 and 10 times, people who purchased more than 10 times, right? These are 4 stages that are very simple to understand, and you can sort of try to move people up the funnel so that somebody who's never purchased now becomes a first-time purchaser or a 1 to 3 time purchaser. Somebody who's purchased up to 3 times now purchases more, and you manage life cycle that way. You can manage, further within these champion users or even these simple segments based on counts, etc. You can further segment by, gender is a good example, right? Within your champions or within your cannot lose them users, you might have different strategies or different sort of user journeys, if you will, for men versus women. The kind of content, the kind of offers, etc. you make could be different. So you can get very, very sophisticated, but it again depends on sort of your comfort or ability or team size and sophistication to work with these large amounts of data. So start somewhere. I guess my simple advice is start somewhere. It can get very exotic pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, that's
direct value in it.
Yeah, well, that actually leads perfectly into the next question, which is where should they start? So this person has a question on where to get started on turning a hibernating user into a champion user. How do you kind of move them up into that model on the grid?
Yeah, I mean, again, it obviously the specific answer will depending on what type of app or website you are. If you're e-commerce or you're music streaming or video streaming app or whatever. So that depends. But if you think conceptually, a hibernating user is somebody whose recency and frequency have pretty much gone to zero. You want to try to sort of give them, almost content recommendations to start with. You want to give them feature recommendations. You want to say like, hey, whatever, there's a new version of the app that's like whatever, bigger, faster, stronger kind of a thing. There is, XY, this certain feature really helps you do something. So you just want to spark their attention back into why they downloaded your app in the first place. They clearly did that. I mean, you don't show up on somebody's phone by mistake, right? So they clearly downloaded the app once upon a time, and you want to find ways to sort of get to that spark again. And it's almost like acquiring a user, except that it is already your user, and you can sort of reactivate that person. And then once recency increases, once frequency increases, now there's a lot more engagement. That goes on to the next life cycle. Now there is a little discount. Now there's a little reward. And that way they make their way up to becoming champions. And that's the whole point.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, delivering value, right? It's all about what does your product do, and thinking about recency, frequency too, in the sense of what specifically is your product intention, and how recent and how frequent should users be making their way and engaging with your app, right? So like travel apps versus shopping apps, right? They're going to have different kind of frequencies. So having a sense for how recent and frequent these users should be in there, I think, is important. And then trying to deliver value as quick as possible as they interact with the application.
And it's all about context. Actually, a term that we didn't use, in today's conversation is context. But lifecycle management is really all about context, right? If you, if you're trying to sort of sell to everybody, whether it's hibernating, a brand new user, or whatever, that's not going to go very far. You've got to get people what they expect with their own context in the app. And it's a very different journey. I mean, my journey through an app is very different, Kevin, from your journey through an app. And just the ability of a brand or an app to be contextual makes the whole lot of difference. And that's what really the whole premise of lifecycle management is. Treat the hibernating guy differently than you would treat a loyal customer, kind of a thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that point, I actually have a question just to kind of riff with you here for the folks. Is you definitely treat them differently. Is there a good place to not necessarily start, but is there a good way to kind of balance keeping your champion users happy versus focusing on those hibernating users, right? Like, so essentially, which one's more important, or is it not about really importance? Does that make sense?
Yeah. It is really not about, I mean, I don't know if there is a relative importance. Obviously, it's relative priorities based on what is the most ROI or value for money based on the size of your team, etc. comes into play. What should you prioritize first might be a different question for each business. But I don't see this as one being less important than the other. The point is that you have acquired your users by hook or by crook. They are by your users now. So now you might as well try to keep them engaged, going, retained, lifetime value, whatever measure you want to put to them. You might as well try to increase their lifetime value. And treating them, the only difference between lifecycle management and sort of this overall, it's just not, don't treat all your users as one big blob. That's the only benefit that lifecycle management brings to you. It tells you that, hey, look at them differently, break them up, because there is a context to each segment, and you can treat them slightly differently. So they feel nice, they feel that the brand cares, they feel it's a little personal. They got a little different offer than their best friend got. All these things is what keeps engagement going. So retain the users you've acquired, because you've most likely spent money to acquire your users, is the broader thing. And I don't think whether it's elevating the hibernating thing more than elevating the champions or keeping people within the champion segment is more important. One is not more important than the other, in my book at least.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that makes total sense. All right. Well, those are the questions from the audience. Before we move on and kind of wrap this up, Sunil, do you have any closing statements or parting words for the group here?
No, I think, so I had a question in the sense, is this video also going to be available to the participants, Kevin?
Yeah, absolutely. So let me go ahead and roll into the next slide so we can give everybody context on what to do from here. Moving right into just a little bit about our platform and who we are. I'm sure you guys checked us out on the site. You had to register for the webinar, but quickly, if you're interested in finding a technology partner or a platform to kind of help you do these things that we've talked about today, we have you covered for sure. Our platform combines real-time customer insights, an advanced segmentation engine, and powerful engagement tools all into one single platform. So you don't have things that are all over the place and disjointed. You have everything in one platform that you're going to need in 2019. We have everything from automated segmentation, like we talked about today with RFM and psychographic segmentation, all kinds of different stuff there, to funnels and cohort analysis tools. And then on the engagement side, we have things, like push notifications, in-app messaging, SMS messaging, all of those stuff available inside the same platform. And then obviously real-time insights, all the real-time insights that you're going to need about who your users are, what they like, what they don't like, and what they're doing inside your app. So that way you can kind of act on this data and make it actionable. That's our goal here with what we do with our data and how we compile all this profile and all these customer insights into one platform. We're trusted by today's top brands. Some of them include the Denver Broncos, Vodafone, Domino's, Sony, Curiosity, just to name a few. We actually have over 8,000 customers globally. We are on over 1.5 billion devices reached. We process over 120 billion events per month, and we also send over 80 billion messages per month. So our platform is completely secure, completely scalable, and trusted by the best of the best in the business. That being said, I want to give you guys a few tools. Being the head of content here at CleverTap, I want to point you in the right direction so you can take action today. First thing is we have an ebook that covers all things automated segmentation, a lot of the stuff that we went over today and in depth. So the more of those campaign ideas for you to kind of draw inspiration from and act on. So you can download that here in the link. And just a note on all these links, we will be publishing this on our website. We'll be promoting the link to all this stuff on our social media platforms, and the video will be available on our website as well. And we'll also be promoting that on our social platform. So everything you've heard today, everything you've seen today, and all of these links here will be available to you as soon as we kind of close the door here. I'd also welcome you and encourage you to go check out our blog. We talk about all things mobile, all things marketing, everything in between. We have a lot of best practices and things on CLM for you to learn from us, and then also learn from our customers and some of the things that they've done to help grow their companies. And if you're interested in actually taking the next steps in, seeing how our tool actually works and how we can help you out, we can do that too. You can schedule a demo, and one of our specialists will help you do that, no problem. So that's pretty much it. That's it for me anyways. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. I think you all have a better understanding of RFM analysis for sure, but more importantly, just CLM in general. I think Sunil illustrated everything great. Sunil, any parting words before we kind of wrap this up and close down the system?
No, not really. I mean, thank you again. I really appreciate every one of you being here. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you can use something in your own worlds when you go back. Thank you for the time.
Yeah. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sunil. And I look forward to chatting with you guys here in the future, and look forward to you checking out our blog and content and all kinds of resources that we have on our site. So cheers. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.